Know, O my lady, that I was not born one-eyed, and mine is a strange story, and it were graven with needle graver on the eye corners, it were a warner to whoso would be warned. I am a king, son of a king, and was brought up like a prince. I learned intoning the Quran according the 7 schools, and I read all manner books, and held disputations on their contents with the doctors and men of science. Moreover, I studied star lore and the fair sayings of poets, and I exercised myself in all branches of learning until I surpassed the people of my time. My skill in calligraphy exceeded that of all the scribes, and my fame was bruited abroad over all climes and cities, and all the kings learned to know my name. Amongst others the king of Hind heard of me and sent to my father to invite me to his court, with offerings and presents and rarities such as befit royalties. So my father fitted out 6 ships for me and my people, and we put to sea and sailed for the space of a full month till we made the land. Then we brought out the horses that were with us in the ships, and, after loading the camels with our presents for the prince, we set forth inland. But we had marched only a little way, when behold, a dust cloud upflew, and grew until it walled the horizon from view. After an hour or so the veil lifted and discovered beneath it 50 horsemen, ravening lions to the sight, in steel armor dight. We observed them straightly and low. They were cutters off of the highway, wild as wild Arabs. When they saw that we were only 4 and had with us but the 10 camels carrying the presents, they dashed down upon us with lances at rest. We signed to them, with our fingers, as it were saying, "We be messengers of the great king of Hind, so harm us not." But they answered on like wise, "We are not in his dominions to obey, nor are we subject to his sway." Then they set upon us and slew some of my slaves and put the lave to flight, and I also fled after I had gotten a wound, a grievous hurt, whilst the Arabs were taken up with the money and the presents which were with us. I went forth unknowing whither I went, having become mean as I was mighty, and I fared on until I came to the crest of a mountain, where I took shelter for the night in a cave. When day arose I set out again, nor ceased after this fashion till I arrived at a fair city and a well-filled. Now it was the season when winter was turning away with his rime, and to greet the world with his flowers came prime, and the young blooms were springing and the streams flowed ringing, and the birds were sweetly singing, as saith the poet concerning a certain city when describing it. A place secure from every thought of fear, safety and peace forever lorded here. Its beauty seemed to beautify its sons, and as in heaven its happy folk appear. I was glad of my arrival, for I was wearied with the way, and yellow of face for weakness and want, but my plight was pitiable and I knew not whither to betake me. So I accosted a tailor sitting in his little shop and saluted him. He returned my salam, and bade me kindly welcome and wished me well and entreated me gently and asked me of the cause of my strangerhood. I told him all my past from first to last, and he was concerned on my account and said, "O youth, disclose not thy secret to any, the king of this city is the greatest enemy thy father hath, and there is bloodwood between them, and thou hast cause to fear for thy life." Then he set meat and drink before me, and I ate and drank and he with me, and we conversed freely till nightfall, when he cleared me a place in a corner of his shop and brought me a carpet and a coverlet. I tarried with him 3 days, at the end of which time he said to me, "Knowest thou no calling whereby to win thy living, O my son?" "I am learned in the law," I replied, "and a doctor of doctrine, an adept in art and science, a mathematician and a notable penman." He rejoined, "Thy calling is of no account in our city, where not a soul understandeth science or even writing or aught save money making." Then said I, "By Allah, I know nothing but what I have mentioned," and he answered, "Gird thy middle and take thee a hatchet and a cord, and go and hew wood in the wool for thy daily bread, till Allah send thee relief, and tell none who thou art lest they slay thee." Then he bought me an axe and a rope and gave me in charge to certain woodcutters, and with these guardians I went forth into the forest, where I cut fuel with the whole of my day and came back in the evening bearing my bundle on my head. I sold it for half a dinar, with part of which I bought provision and laid by the rest. In such work I spent a whole year, and when this was ended I went out one day, as was my wont, into the wilderness, and, wandering away from my companions, I chanced on a thickly grown lowland in which there was an abundance of wood. So I entered and I found the gnarled stump of a great tree and loosened the ground about it and shoveled away the earth. Presently my hatchet rang upon a copper ring, so I cleared away the soil and behold, the ring was attached to a wooden trapdoor. This I raised and there appeared beneath it a staircase. I descended the steps to the bottom and came to a door, which I opened and found myself in a noble hall strong of structure and beautifully built, where was a damsel like a pearl of great price, whose favor banished from my heart all grief and cark and care, and whose soft speech healed the soul in despair and captivated the wise in wear. Her figure measured 5 feet in height, her breasts were firm and upright, her cheek a very garden of delight, her color lively bright, her face gleamed like dawn through curly tresses which gloomed like night, and above the snows of her bosom glittered teeth of a pearly white. As the poet said of one like her, slim-waisted loveling, jetty hair encrowned a wand of willow on a sandy mound. And as saith another, 4 things that meet not, save they here unite to shed my heart blood and to rape my sprite. Brilliantest forehead, tresses jetty bright, cheeks rosy red and stature beauty dight. When I looked upon her I prostrated myself before him who had created her, for the beauty and loveliness he had shaped in her, and she looked at me and said, Art thou man or jinni? I am a man, answered I, and she, now who brought thee to this place where I have abided 25 years without even yet seeing man in it? Quoth I, and indeed I found her words wonder sweet, and my heart was melted to the core by them. O my lady, my good fortune led me hither for the dispelling of my cark and care. Then I related to her all my mishap from first to last, and my case appeared to her exceeding grievous, so she wept and said, I will tell thee my story in my turn. I am the daughter of the king Iphidamus, lord of the islands of Abnus, who married me to my cousin, the son of my paternal uncle, but on my wedding night an Ifrit named Jurjis bin Rajmus, first cousin that is, mother's sister's son, of Iblis, the foul fiend, snatched me up and, flying away with me like a bird, set me down in this place, whither he conveyed all I needed of fine stuffs, raiment and jewels and furniture, and meat and drink and other else. Once in every 10 days he comes here and lies a single night with me, and then wends his way, for he took me without the consent of his family, and he hath agreed with me that if ever I need him by night or by day, I have only to pass my hand over yonder 2 lines engraved upon the alcove, and he will appear to me before my fingers cease touching. 4 days have now passed since he was here, and, as there remain 6 days before he come again, say me, wilt thou abide with me 5 days, and go hence the day before his coming? I replied yes, and yes again. O rare, if all this be not a dream! Hereat she was glad and, springing to her feet, seized my hand and carried me through an arched doorway to a hammam bath, a fair hall and richly decorate. I doffed my clothes, and she doffed hers, then we bathed and she washed me, and when this was done we left the bath, and she seated me by her side upon a high divan, and brought me sherbet scented with musk. When we felt cool after the bath, she set food before me and we ate and fell to talking, but presently she said to me, Lay thee down and take thy rest, for surely thou must be weary. So I thanked her, my lady, and lay down and slept soundly, forgetting all that had happened to me. When I awoke I found her rubbing and shampooing my feet, so I again thanked her and blessed her and we sat for a while talking. Said she, By Allah, I was sad at heart, for that I have dwelt alone underground for these 25 years, and praise be to Allah, who hath sent me someone with whom I can converse. Then she asked, O youth, what sayest thou to wine? And I answered, Do as thou wilt. Whereupon she went to a cupboard and took out a sealed flask of right old wine and set off the table with flowers and scented herbs and began to sing these lines. Had we known of thy coming we fain had dispread the cores of our hearts or the balls of our eyes. Our cheeks as a carpet to greet thee had thrown and our eyelids had strown for thy feet to betread. Now when she finished her verse I thanked her, for indeed love of her had gotten hold of my heart and my grief and anguish were gone. We sat at converse and carousal till nightfall, and with her I spent the night, such night never spent I in all my life. On the morrow delight followed delight till midday, by which time I had drunken wine so freely that I had lost my wits, and stood up, staggering to the right and to the left, and said Come, O my charmer, and I will carry thee up from this underground vault and deliver thee from the spell of thy jinni. She laughed and replied Content thee and hold thy peace, Of every 10 days one is for the Ifrit and the other 9 are thine. Quoth I, and in good sooth drink had got the better of me, this very instant will I break down the alcove whereon is graven the talisman and summon the Ifrit that I may slay him, for it is a practice of mine to slay Ifrits. When she heard my words her color waxed wan and she said, By Allah, do not. And she began repeating. This is a thing wherein destruction lies, I read thee shun it and thy wits be wise. And these also. O thou who seekest severance, draw the rein of thy swift steed nor seek overmuch to advance. Ah stay! For treachery is the rule of life, and sweets of meeting end in severance. I heard her verse but paid no heed to her words, nay, I raised my foot and administered to the alcove a mighty kick, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 13th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the second Kalandar thus continued his tale to the lady, but when, O my mistress, I kicked that alcove with a mighty kick, behold, the air starkened and darkened and thundered and lightened, the earth trembled and quaked and the world became invisible. At once the fumes of wine left my head, I cried to her, What is the matter? And she replied, The Ifrit is upon us. Did I not warn thee of this? By Allah, thou hast brought ruin upon me, but fly for thy life and go up by the way thou camest down. So I fled up the staircase, but, in the excess of my fear, I forgot sandals and hatchet. And when I had mounted 2 steps I turned to look for them, and lo! I saw the earth cleave asunder, and there arose from it an Ifrit, a monster of hideousness, who said to the damsel, What trouble and pother be this wherewith thou disturbest me? What mishap hath betided thee? No mishap hath befallen me, she answered, save that my breast was straitened and my heart heavy with sadness, so I drank a little wine to broaden it and to hearten myself, then I rose to obey a call of nature, but the wine had gotten into my head and I fell against the alcove. Thou liest, like the whore thou art! Shrieked the Ifrit, and he looked around the hall right and left till he caught sight of my axe and sandals and said to her, What be these but the belongings of some mortal who hath been in thy society? She answered, I never set eyes upon them till this moment, they must have been brought by thee hither cleaving to thy garments. Quoth the Ifrit, These words are absurd, thou harlot! Thou strumpet! Then he stripped her stark naked and, stretching her upon the floor, bound her hands and feet to 4 stakes, like one crucified, and set about torturing and trying to make her confess. I could not bear to stand listening to her cries and groans, so I climbed the stair on the quake with fear, and when I reached the top I replaced the trapdoor and covered it with earth. Then repented I of what I had done with penitence exceeding, and thought of the lady and her beauty and loveliness, and the tortures she was suffering at the hands of the accursed Ifrit, after her quiet life of 25 years, and how all that had happened to her was for cause of me. I bethought me of my father and his kingly estate and how I had become a woodcutter, and how, after my time had been a while serene, the world had again waxed turbid and troubled to me. So I wept bitterly and repeated this couplet. What time fate's tyranny shall most oppress thee perpend? One day shall joy thee, one distress thee. Then I walked till I reached the home of my friend, the tailor, whom I found most anxiously expecting me, indeed he was, as the saying goes, on coals of fire for my account. And when he saw me he said, All night long my heart hath been heavy, fearing for thee from wild beasts or other mischances. Now praise be to Allah for thy safety. I thanked him for his friendly solicitude and, retiring to my corner, sat pondering and musing on what had befallen me, and I blamed and chided myself for my meddlesome folly and my frowardness in kicking the alcove. I was calling myself to account when behold, my friend, the tailor, came to me and said, O youth, in the shop there is an old man, a Persian, who seeketh thee, he hath thy hatchet and thy sandals which he had taken to the woodcutters, saying, I was going out at what time the muezzin began the call to dawn prayer, when I chanced upon these things and know not whose they are, so direct me to their owner. The woodcutters recognized the hatchet and directed him to thee, he is sitting in my shop, so fare forth to him and thank him and take thine axe and sandals. When I heard these words I turned yellow with fear and felt stunned as by a blow, and, before I could recover myself, lo! The floor of my private room clove asunder, and out of it rose the Persian who was the Ifrit. He had tortured the lady with exceeding tortures, nathless she would not confess to him aught, so he took the hatchet and sandals and said to her, "As surely as I am Jurgis of the seed of Iblis, I will bring thee back the owner of this and these." Then he went to the woodcutters with the pretense aforesaid and, being directed to me, after waiting a while in the shop till the fact was confirmed, he suddenly snatched me up as a hawk snatcheth a mouse and flew high in air, but presently descended and plunged with me under the earth, I being aswoon the while, and lastly set me down in the subterranean palace wherein I had passed that blissful night. And there I saw the lady stripped to the skin, her limbs bound to 4 stakes and blood welling from her sides. At the sight my eyes ran over with tears, but the Ifrit covered her person and said, "O wanton, is not this man thy lover?" She looked upon me and replied, "I wot him not nor have I ever seen him before this hour." Quoth the Ifrit, "What? This torture and yet no confessing," and quoth she, "I never saw this man in my born days, and it is not lawful in Allah's sight to tell lies on him. If thou know him not," said the Ifrit to her, "take this sword and strike off his head." She hent the sword in hand and came close up to me, and I signaled to her with my eyebrows, my tears the while flowing adown my cheeks. She understood me and made answer, also by signs, "How couldst thou bring all this evil upon me?" And I rejoined after the same fashion, "This is the time for mercy and forgiveness." And the mute tongue of my case spake aloud saying, "Mine eyes were dragomans for my tongue betide and told full clear the love I fain would hide. When last we met and tears in torrents railed for tongue struck dumb my glances testified." She signed with eye glance while her lips were mute, I signed with fingers and she kin th implied. Our eyebrows did all duty twixt us twain, and we being speechless love spake loud and plain. Then, "O my mistress," the lady threw away the sword and said, "How shall I strike the neck of one I wot not, and who hath done me no evil? Such deed were not lawful in my law." And she held her hand. Said the Ifrit, "'Tis grievous to thee to slay thy lover, and, because he hath lain with thee, thou endurest these torments and obstinately refusest to confess. After this it is clear to me that only like loveth and pitieth like." Then he turned to me and asked me, "O man, haply thou also dost not know this woman," whereto I answered, "And pray who may she be? Assuredly I never saw her till this instant." "Then take the sword," said he, "and strike off her head, and I will believe that, thou wottest her not and will leave thee free to go, and will not deal hardly with thee." I replied, "That will I do," and, taking the sword went forward sharply and raised my hand to smite. But she signed to me with her eyebrows, "Have I failed thee in aught of love, and is it thus that thou requitest me?" I understood what her looks implied and answered her with an eye glance, "I will sacrifice my soul for thee." And the tongue of the case wrote in our hearts these lines: "How many a lover with his eyebrows speaketh to his beloved, as his passion pleadeth. With flashing on his passion he inspireth, and well she seeth what his pleading needeth. How sweet the look when each on other gazeth, and with what swiftness and how sure it speedeth. And this with eyebrows all his passion writeth, and that with eyeballs all his passion readeth." Then my eyes filled with tears to overflowing, and I cast the sword from my hand, saying, "O mighty Ifrit and hero, if a woman lacking wits and faith deem it unlawful to strike off my head, how can it be lawful for me, a man, to smite her neck whom I never saw in my whole life? I cannot do such misdeed though thou cause me drink the cup of death and perdition." Then said the Ifrit, "Ye twain show the good understanding between you, but I will let you see how such doings end." He took the sword, and struck off the lady's hands first, with 4 strokes, and then her feet, whilst I looked on and made sure of death, and she farewelled me with her dying eyes. So the Ifrit cried at her, "Thou whorest and makest me a widow with thine eyes," and struck her so that her head went flying. Then turned he to me and said, "O mortal, we have it in our law that, when the wife committeth advoutry it is lawful for us to slay her. As for this damsel, I snatched her away on her bride night when she was a girl of 12 and she knew no one but myself. I used to come to her once in every 10 days and lie with her the night, under the semblance of a man, a Persian, and when I was well assured that she had cuckolded me, I slew her. But as for thee, I am not well satisfied that thou hast wronged me and her, nevertheless I must not let thee go unharmed, so ask a boon of me and I will grant it. Then I rejoiced, O my lady, with exceeding joy and said, What boon shall I crave of thee? He replied, Ask me this boon, into what shape I shall bewitch thee, wilt thou be a dog, or an ass or an ape? I rejoined, and indeed I had hoped that mercy might be shown me, by Allah, spare me, that Allah spare thee for sparing a Muslim and a man who never wronged thee. And I humbled myself before him with exceeding humility, and remained standing in his presence, saying, I am sore oppressed by circumstance. He replied, Talk me no long talk, it is in my power to slay thee, but I give thee instead thy choice. Quoth I, O thou Ifrit, it would beseech thee to pardon me even as the envied pardoned the envier. Quoth he, And how was that? And I began to tell him the tale of the envier and the envied.